The clock had just struck 11 on a chilly October night when Officer James Barrett's radio crackled to life. He was just finishing his coffee at the local diner, trying to stay warm during his night shift. The dispatcher's voice was calm but urgent. Domestic disturbance reported at Pine Grove Apartments. Building C neighbor heard children crying. Barrett sighed, putting down his half-finished coffee. These calls were always the hardest, especially in the Oak District. As he drove through the quiet streets, streetlights cast long shadows across his patrol car. The Pine Grove Apartments weren't exactly in the best part of town, the kind of place where dreams often came to die. The building's exterior light flickered as he pulled up, casting an eerie glow across the crumbling brick facade. The sound of his boots on the metal stairs echoed through the night as he climbed to the third floor. Apartment 3C's door was slightly ajar, never a good sign. "Police department," he called out, pushing the door open slowly. The apartment was dark, save for a small kitchen light that buzzed intermittently. The air felt heavy with the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. Then he heard it, a tiny whimper from somewhere in the back. Following the sound, Barrett found them in the bedroom, 6 girls huddled together on a bare mattress in the corner. The oldest one, who couldn't have been more than 13, held the youngest protectively in her arms. Their eyes, wide with fear and uncertainty, followed his every move. "Hey there," Barrett said softly, crouching down to their level. "I'm Officer Barrett, but you can call me James. Is everything okay?" He kept his voice gentle, noticing how the youngest one clutched her worn teddy bear tighter. The oldest girl spoke first, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Mom's been gone for 3 days. She said she'd be back, but..." She trailed off, looking down at her sisters. "I've been trying to take care of them, but we ran out of food yesterday." Barrett's heart sank. The apartment told the rest of the story. Empty cupboards, no electricity except for that one kitchen light, and a stack of past-due notices on the counter. These girls had been surviving on their own, trying to keep their situation secret from the world. As he radioed for backup and child protective services, Barrett noticed little details that spoke volumes. Homework sheets carefully stored in folders despite their circumstances. The oldest girl's attempt to keep the younger one's hair neat and tidy. A makeshift calendar on the wall, marking the days their mother had been gone. "What's your name?" he asked the oldest girl as they waited for CPS to arrive. "Rose," she answered, still keeping her sisters close. "These are my sisters, Joy, Hope, Grace, Faith, and Little Angel." Each girl lifted her head slightly at the mention of her name, their faces showing a mix of fear and relief that someone had finally found them. Barrett sat with them, sharing stories about his dog Max and asking about their favorite subjects in school. Slowly, the youngest ones began to relax, though Rose remained vigilant. When he pulled out some granola bars from his patrol car's emergency stash, their eyes lit up with a hunger that made his chest ache. The arrival of the CPS worker brought reality crashing back. The girls would need to be taken to the emergency children's shelter. As Barrett helped them gather their few belongings into plastic bags, there weren't even proper suitcases. He noticed how they moved as one unit, the older ones automatically helping the younger ones, a well-choreographed dance born of necessity and love. "Will they keep us together?" Rose asked quietly as they walked to the CPS van, her voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air like a prayer. Barrett knew the harsh reality. Finding a placement for 6 siblings together was nearly impossible. As he watched the van drive away, Barrett couldn't shake the image of those 6 faces from his mind. He'd handled hundreds of similar calls over his 12 years on the force, but something about these girls was different. Their resilience, their unity, the way they looked out for each other despite everything life had thrown at them. Sitting in his patrol car, he couldn't bring himself to drive away just yet. The girls' file lay open on his passenger seat, their mother's history of disappearances, the previous CPS reports, the failed attempts at intervention. The system had failed them repeatedly, and now they faced their greatest fear, being separated from each other. Barrett pulled out his phone and started making calls. He had a spare bedroom and a small office that could be converted. It would be tight, but it was better than splitting them up. As he dialed the number for the foster care licensing agency, he knew his life was about to change forever. Sometimes, the biggest decisions don't feel like decisions at all. They feel like the only possible choice your heart will let you make. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Pine Grove Police Department as Officer Barrett sat across from his captain, paperwork scattered across the desk between them. The captain leaned back in his chair, a mix of concern and confusion etched on his weathered face. "James, you've always been one of my best officers, but this is something else entirely. 6 kids? On your own?" The captain's voice carried the weight of 20 years of experience dealing with difficult situations, but this was uncharted territory. Barrett's fingers traced the edge of his coffee cup, still untouched and growing cold. "I know it sounds crazy, Captain, but you didn't see them in that apartment. You didn't see how they protected each other, how the older ones made sure the little ones had the last bits of food." News traveled fast in their small southern town. By lunchtime, the department was buzzing with whispered conversations that stopped whenever Barrett walked by. His partner of 5 years, Officer Chen, was the first to openly address it during their patrol. "So, you're really doing this?" Chen asked as they drove past the town square, where the annual Harvest Festival preparations were underway. "Taking in 6 girls? You haven't even had a houseplant that survived longer than a month." Barrett couldn't help but laugh at that. "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Tom." His expression grew serious. "But yeah, I am. The foster care licensing agency is fast-tracking my application. The girls could be home with me by next week." Home. The word felt different now. Barrett spent his weekend transforming his modest 3-bedroom house into a space for 7. His sister Katie showed up uninvited, her face a mix of worry and determination. "James, have you really thought this through?" She followed him through the local department store as he filled 2 shopping carts with necessities. "You don't know the first thing about raising girls, let alone." She lowered her voice, glancing around. "Black girls. This town isn't exactly known for its open-mindedness." Barrett stopped in the middle of the bedding aisle, surrounded by colorful comforter sets and throw pillows. "Katie, I know you're worried. Everyone's worried. But these girls need someone who won't give up on them, who'll keep them together. Maybe I don't know everything about raising girls, but I know about keeping people safe, about fighting for what's right." The next few days brought a parade of reactions from the community. Mrs. Johnson, his elderly neighbor of 10 years, stopped bringing over her weekly banana bread. The cashier at the local grocery store gave him odd looks as he filled his cart with children's cereals and snacks. But there were surprises too. Miss Patricia, who ran the local beauty supply store, showed up at his door with bags full of hair care products and a determined look in her eye. "You're going to need help with this, Officer Barrett. These girls' hair needs proper care, and I'm not about to let them go around looking any kind of way." The local church community was split. Some members whispered about inappropriate arrangements and natural order, while others, led by Reverend Thompson's wife, organized a household goods donation drive. Barrett's phone rang constantly with opinions he hadn't asked for and advice he wasn't sure he needed. Rose and her sisters visited the house for the first time on a sunny Wednesday afternoon. Barrett watched as they moved through the spaces he created for them, their faces a mixture of hope and hesitation. The younger girls gasped at the sight of new beds with fresh sheets and stuffed animals. Little Angel clutched her worn teddy bear as she stared wide-eyed at the bookshelf filled with children's books. But it was Rose's reaction that stuck with him. She stood in the doorway of the room she'd share with Joy, running her hand over the purple comfort he'd chosen. "Why?" she asked quietly, turning to face him. "Why would you do all this for us?" Barrett knelt down to her level, the way he had that first night. "Because every child deserves a safe place to call home, and every family deserves a chance to stay together. Your sisters look up to you, Rose. You've been so strong for them. But you don't have to do it alone anymore." The reality of what he was undertaking hit in full force that night after the girls left. 6 young lives, 6 different personalities, 6 sets of hopes and fears. The town's judgment was the least of his worries. He stayed up late, watching YouTube tutorials about hair care, researching cultural sensitivity, and reading everything he could find about helping children heal from trauma. His mother's voice on the phone the next morning was thick with emotion. "James Michael Barrett, what are people going to think?" He looked at the family photo hanging on his wall, him and his parents at his police academy graduation, all smiles and certainty about the future. "Mom, sometimes doing the right thing means not caring what people think." These girls need a family. They need stability. Everything else, we'll figure it out as we go. As he prepared for the final home inspection, Barrett found himself standing in the middle of his transformed living room. Where there had once been a bachelor's sparse decor, there were now colorful throw pillows, home workstations, and a large wall calendar to keep track of 6 different schedules. On the mantel, he placed a framed quote that Rose had written during their last visit. "Family is who chooses to stay." The town would talk. Some people would never understand. But as Barrett hung the last of the girls' artwork on the fridge, he knew with absolute certainty that he was making the right choice. Sometimes the biggest acts of love come with the loudest opposition, but that just means you're shaking up the world in exactly the way it needs to be shaken. The first morning in their new home started with pancakes, or at least an attempt at pancakes. Barrett stood in the kitchen, surrounded by flour clouds and eggshells, while 6 pairs of eyes watched his every move. The first batch came out looking more like abstract art than breakfast, drawing quiet giggles from the younger girls. "I can help," Rose offered, sliding off her chair. "Mom used to let me make breakfast sometimes." She moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, showing Barrett how to test if the pan was hot enough by sprinkling water drops that danced across the surface. Those early days were filled with small moments of learning and adjustment. Barrett discovered that each girl had her own rhythm, her own way of testing the boundaries of this new arrangement. Grace, the middle child at 9 years old, would wake up at dawn and sit silently in the living room, as if afraid to make any noise. Faith, just a year younger, hoarded food in her bedroom, old habits from uncertain times. Bedtime proved to be the biggest challenge. The first night, all 6 girls crammed into one bedroom, sleeping on mattresses pushed together despite having their own beds. Barrett understood. They'd spent too long protecting each other to stop now. He brought in extra night lights and left their doors open, his heart aching as he heard their whispered conversations late into the night. "Do you think he'll get tired of us?" Hope's voice drifted down the hallway one evening. "Shoo," Rose whispered back. "Just don't get too comfortable. Remember what happened last time." Barrett sat outside their room, listening but not interrupting. He'd learned that trust wasn't built with words alone. It was built in moments, in consistency, in being there day after day. The breakthrough with Little Angel came unexpectedly. During a thunderstorm, instead of running to Rose as usual, she appeared at Barrett's bedroom door, clutching her teddy bear. "Can I stay here?" she asked in a tiny voice. "The thunder's too loud." That night, she fell asleep holding his hand, and something shifted in the household. Hair care became a weekend ritual, thanks to Miss Patricia's patient teaching. Barrett learned to section, moisturize, and braid, his police officer's hands becoming gentler with practice. These sessions turned into story time, with the girls sharing memories of their mother, both good and difficult, while Barrett listened, building a picture of the woman who had given him these precious daughters. Mom used to sing when she was happy, Joy shared one Sunday afternoon as Barrett struggled with her cornrows. She knew all these old songs, but then the bad days came more often. The other girls grew quiet, each lost in their own memories. The first parent-teacher conference tested Barrett's resolve. He sat through 6 different meetings, hearing variations of the same concerned questions. The girls seemed distracted, their teachers said. They're having trouble adjusting. One teacher spoke in slow, overly simple terms, as if Barrett couldn't possibly understand the complexity of his new family's needs. But there were victories too. Hope made the honor roll. Grace joined the school choir. Faith started smiling more, especially after Barrett converted the backyard shed into an art studio for her growing collection of paintings. Little Angel stopped having nightmares every night, though she still kept her teddy bear close. Rose remained the most challenging. She watched Barrett's interactions with her sisters like a hawk, ready to step in at any sign of trouble. One evening, after the younger girls were asleep, she confronted him in the kitchen. "Why don't you ever yell?" she asked, her voice tight with confusion. "Even when Angel spilled juice all over your police uniform, or when Faith broke your mother's vase. You just fix things." Barrett put down the dish he was washing. "Because yelling doesn't solve problems," he said simply. "And nothing, no thing, is more important than making you girls feel safe." Tears welled up in Rose's eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she admitted. "For you to decide we're too much trouble." Barrett dried his hands and pulled out a chair. "Come here," he said, patting the seat next to him. "Let me tell you about the night I found you all. I wasn't just responding to a call, I was being led to my family. Every day since then has been a gift, even the hard days. Especially the hard days." The next morning, Rose came downstairs early and started making pancakes. But this time, instead of taking over, she showed Barrett how to flip them properly, laughing when he still managed to make a mess. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, but it was progress, the kind that comes from countless small moments of choosing to trust, to try, to stay. As spring turned to summer, their house developed its own rhythm. Homework was done at the kitchen table, with Barrett learning 6th grade math alongside Joy while helping Grace with her reading. The girls' laughter, once rare and cautious, began to fill the house more frequently. They created new traditions: Sunday movie nights, Saturday morning pancakes, now mostly edible, and evening walks with Barrett's dog Max, who had become the family's loyal protector. Trust, Barrett learned, wasn't built in grand gestures but in the steady accumulation of kept promises. It was being there for every nightmare, every scraped knee, every small triumph. It was showing up, day after day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, 6 girls who had learned to expect disappointment began to believe in the possibility of forever. The first sign appeared on a Tuesday morning. Barrett found it stuck to his front door as he left for work. "Keep Pine Grove traditional." He quietly removed it before the girls could see it, but his hands shook slightly as he crumpled the paper. That same week, the whispers at the local grocery store grew louder. "Did you hear about that police officer?" A woman said, not bothering to lower her voice as Barrett and the girls walked past. "Taking in those children, it's just not natural." Little Angel gripped his hand tighter, while Rose's shoulders stiffened, her chin lifting slightly higher. The morning carpool line at school became a daily challenge. Some parents pulled their children away when Barrett's girls approached. Others stared openly, their disapproval clear in every glance. Fight started asking to be dropped off a block away from school. "They make me feel like we did something wrong," she confessed one morning, picking at a loose thread on her backpack. "Like we're not supposed to be a family." Barrett pulled the car over and turned to face his daughters. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "Family isn't about looking the same or following someone else's rules. It's about love, respect, and choosing each other every single day. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth our worry." But support came from unexpected places. Officer Chen started showing up at their house every Sunday with his famous dumplings, teaching the girls how to fold them while sharing stories about growing up between 2 cultures. "People used to stare at my family too," he told them. "Now they line up at my mom's restaurant every weekend." Miss Patricia's beauty supply store became their safe haven. She'd close early on Wednesday afternoons, turning the space into an informal gathering spot where the girls could do their homework while other black mothers from the community shared advice with Barrett about everything from hair care to dealing with prejudice. "You're doing good, Officer Barrett," Miss Patricia said one afternoon, showing him how to properly detangle Hope's curls. "These girls needed someone to fight for them, and you stepped up. Don't let anybody make you doubt that." The local coffee shop owner, Mrs. Rivera, started saving date-old pastries for them. "My parents crossed borders to give me a better life," she explained, loading up a box with cinnamon rolls. "Family doesn't always look like what people expect." Even at the police station, things began to shift. Officers who had initially kept their distance started asking Barrett for advice about connecting with communities they served. The captain, who had been skeptical at first, became one of their strongest supporters after seeing how Barrett's experience with his daughters changed his approach to community policing. One rainy Saturday, Barrett found an envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a letter from their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, who had stopped bringing over banana bread months ago. "I was wrong," she wrote. "Watching your family these past months has taught me more about love than 60 years in church. The banana bread will return, if you'll have it." The next weekend, 6 girls helped Barrett build a wheelchair ramp for Mrs. Johnson's front porch. As they worked, other neighbors began to emerge from their houses. Someone brought lemonade. Another family showed up with tools. By sunset, the project had turned into an impromptu block party. But not everything changed overnight. Rose still came home some days with hurt in her eyes from comments made at school. Faith's art teacher suggested she stick to realistic skin tones in her paintings, prompting Barrett to schedule a meeting with the principal. The annual town festival committee accidentally lost their family's registration form. Through it all, their support network grew stronger. A group of mothers from different backgrounds started a monthly potluck dinner, each sharing dishes from their cultures. The girls learned to make tamales from Mrs. Rivera, dumplings from Officer Chen's mother, and jollof rice from their new neighbor, Dr. Mensah. Barrett found allies in unexpected places. The local librarian created a diverse book club for young readers, making sure the girls saw themselves represented in the stories they read. The high school basketball coach invited Rose to join the team, standing firmly behind her when other parents complained. One evening, as Barrett sat on their front porch watching the girls teach Mrs. Johnson's grandchildren how to jump double dutch, he noticed something profound had changed. The stares from passing cars had become waves. The whispers in the grocery store were now replaced with genuine smiles. Their family had become part of the neighborhood's fabric. "Look, Dad," Angel called out, successfully jumping into the rope for the first time. The word Dad still made his heart skip a beat, even after all these months. Around them, the sound of children laughing mixed with adult conversations in different languages and accents, creating a new kind of music for their small southern town. That night, as Barrett tucked Angel into bed, she asked him a question that stopped him in his tracks. Why do some people have to learn how to love? He sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes people are scared of what they don't understand. But love is stronger than fear. And when they see real love, like what we have in our family, it helps them be brave enough to change. The next morning, Barrett found a new sign on his front door. This one read, "Love makes a family." It was signed by dozens of their neighbors, their signatures a rainbow of different handwriting styles and colors. Rose helped him frame it, and they hung it in their living room. A reminder that sometimes the biggest changes start with one small act of love, rippling outward until they transform an entire community. The courthouse loomed large and intimidating on the morning of their first adoption hearing. Barrett straightened Rose's collar, noticing how her hands trembled slightly despite her brave face. The other girls clustered close, their Sunday-best clothes rustling as they moved through the heavy wooden doors. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Barrett felt 6 small hands grab onto his suit jacket as they stood. Judge Thompson, a stern-faced woman with silver hair, peered down at their unusual family over her reading glasses. "This is certainly an unprecedented case," she began, shuffling through the thick stack of papers before her. "Officer Barrett, you're seeking to adopt all 6 sisters. Are you aware of the enormous responsibility this entails?" Before Barrett could answer, a commotion at the back of the courtroom drew everyone's attention. A woman burst through the doors, her appearance disheveled but her eyes clear and determined. The girl's mother had arrived. "Those are my babies," she announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "And I'm here to take them home." Rose's grip on Barrett's jacket tightened. Little Angel buried her face against his side, while Faith began to shake. The other girls stood frozen, a mix of emotions crossing their faces: hope, fear, confusion, and something else that broke Barrett's heart: resignation, as if they'd been expecting this moment all along. The judge called for a recess, and Barrett found himself in a small conference room with his lawyer, Ms. Richardson, a tough-minded woman who'd taken their case pro bono. "She's been in rehab," Ms. Richardson explained quietly. "She's claiming she's clean now and wants custody restored." The next few weeks became a blur of evaluations, home visits, and court appearances. The girl's mother, Mrs. Taylor, had indeed completed a rehabilitation program. She had a job at a local diner and a small apartment. On paper, she was doing everything right. But what about what we want? Rose demanded during one particularly difficult meeting. "Doesn't that matter to anyone?" She stood in their living room, surrounded by her sisters, facing down a panel of social workers with the same fierce protectiveness that had kept her family alive all those years. Barrett watched from the kitchen, his heart in his throat, as each girl spoke about their life now. Hope talked about making on a roll, how Barrett helped her with homework every night. Grace described their Sunday traditions, pancake breakdowns, as they called them, because Barrett still couldn't flip them without making a mess. Faith showed her art portfolio, full of paintings inspired by their new family. He learns to do our hair, Joy added quietly. Even when it takes hours, even when he has to watch videos over and over to get it right. Little Angel, usually shy around strangers, stepped forward last. He checks for monsters under my bed, she said. Real daddies do that. The social workers exchanged glances, making notes on their clipboards. But it was Mrs. Taylor's reaction that surprised everyone. She sat in the corner, tears streaming down her face, watching her daughters speak with such certainty about their new life. The court battles dragged on through summer and into fall. Barrett's savings dwindled as legal fees mounted, but neighbors rallied around them. Miss Patricia organized a fundraiser at her shop. Officer Chen's mother catered community dinners where people donated what they could. The girls' teachers wrote letters to the judge describing their transformation over the past year. Then came the day that changed everything. Mrs. Taylor asked to meet Barrett alone. They sat in a quiet corner of the local park, watching from a distance as the girls played on the swings. I love my daughters, she began, her voice rough with emotion. But love isn't always enough, is it? You have to be able to show up day after day. You have to be strong enough to put them first. She turned to face Barrett. I've watched you with them. You're the parent I couldn't be. The next court session, Mrs. Taylor stood before Judge Thompson and voluntarily terminated her parental rights. My girls deserve a chance at the life they found, she told the court. They deserve the father they chose. But the legal battle wasn't over. Questions about cultural identity and heritage became the next hurdle. The court appointed cultural advisors to evaluate Barrett's ability to raise black daughters in a predominantly white town. How will you help them navigate racism? One advisor asked. How will you teach them to be proud of who they are when you don't share their experiences? Barrett's answer came not from him, but from Dr. Mensah, their neighbor who had become a close family friend. This man, she testified, has created a village around his daughters. He doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but he makes sure they have access to people who can share their experiences, who can help them understand their heritage. He's not trying to change who they are, he's giving them the security to become who they're meant to be. The final hearing fell on a crisp autumn morning, exactly 1 year after Barrett had first found 6 scared girls in an empty apartment. The courtroom was packed. Miss Patricia, Officer Chen, Mrs. Rivera, teachers, neighbors, even Mrs. Johnson in her wheelchair. Judge Thompson reviewed the final evaluations, the testimonies, the thick file of evidence showing how 6 lives had been transformed by one man's choice to listen to his heart rather than society's expectations. Family, she declared, comes in many forms. What matters isn't how it looks from the outside, but how it feels on the inside. She smiled for the first time in all their court appearances. The adoption is approved. The courtroom erupted in cheers. 6 girls tackled Barrett in a group hug, their tears of joy mixing with his own. But it was Rose's words, whispered in his ear, that he would remember forever. We chose each other. That's what makes it real. As they left the courthouse that day, now legally and irrevocably a family, Barrett realized that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most beautiful victories. And sometimes the family you're meant to have finds you when you're brave enough to open your heart to love in all its unexpected forms. Time has a way of sneaking up on you. One morning, Barrett woke up to find Rose trying to teach Little Angel how to apply mascara in the bathroom. It seemed like just yesterday he was learning to braid their hair, and now here they were, navigating the complicated waters of teenage life. Dad, this isn't fair. Joy slammed her bedroom door, the sound echoing through the house. At 15, she'd been invited to her first house party, and Barrett's police officer instincts had kicked in with a firm no. He stood outside her door, remembering Miss Patricia's words from years ago, teenage girls need boundaries and understanding in equal measure. Let's talk about this, he called out softly. Help me understand why this party is so important to you. The door cracked open slightly. Joy's face appeared, tears streaking her cheeks. Because for once, I just want to be normal. Not one of the black girls adopted by the white cop. Not the girl whose mom chose drugs over her family. Just normal. Barrett's heart ached. These were the moments no parenting book could prepare him for. He sat with Joy on her bed, surrounded by the poetry she'd started writing on her walls, her way of processing the complex emotions of being a teenager with an unusual family story. Normal is overrated, he said finally. But how about this? We'll host the party here. Your friends, your music, your fun, but in a safe space where I can keep an eye on things from a distance. The party became a turning point in their household. Teenagers from different backgrounds filled their backyard, dancing to music that made Barrett feel old. He watched from the kitchen window as Joy moved confidently among her friends, no longer trying to hide her story, but wearing it as part of who she was. Faith's art started changing too. At 16, her paintings became bolder, exploring themes of identity and belonging. The school art show featured her piece titled Shades of Family, a striking portrait of their hands intertwined, each skin tone distinct but part of the same embrace. Some kid at school said I was acting white because I like painting, Faith confided one evening in her art studio, the converted shed that had become her sanctuary. Then another girl said I wasn't black enough because you're my dad. Barrett put down the brushes he was cleaning. You're not acting anything. You're being Faith. The same Faith who painted our entire fence with unicorns when she was 10. The same Faith who sees beauty in everything and everyone. Hope's challenges came in the form of her first crush. She joined the debate team, and a boy there had caught her attention. Barrett overheard her talking to Rose about it late one night. His parents would never let him date me, Hope said, her voice carrying down the hallway. They're always talking about preserving traditional values and stuff. Rose's response made Barrett's chest swell with pride. Then he's not worth your time. We don't dim our light for people stuck in the dark. Grace, always the quiet one, found her voice through music. She joined the church choir and discovered she had a gift. But when she was chosen for a solo in a Christmas concert, anonymous letters appeared suggesting the choice was political correctness gone too far. The night before the concert, Grace sat at the kitchen table, pushing her food around her plate. Maybe I should let someone else do the solo, she whispered. Barrett looked at his daughter, remembering the little girl who used to sing quietly to herself when she thought no one was listening. Grace, your voice is a gift. And gifts aren't meant to be hidden because some people aren't ready to receive them. She sang that solo, her voice soaring through the church. Even the critics fell silent, some wiping away tears by the end. Little Angel, not so little anymore at 12, started asking questions about their biological mother. Do you think she ever thinks about us? She asked one night during their traditional Sunday ice cream run. Barrett chose his words carefully. I know she thinks about you every day. She made the bravest choice a parent can make, putting your happiness above her own. The conversation sparked a new tradition in their house. Once a month, they gathered to add to their family storybook, a big album filled with photos, artwork, and written memories. They included pictures of their mother, acknowledging that love can take many forms and family stories can have many chapters. Rose, now approaching graduation, had become a force to be reckoned with. She started a mentoring program for foster kids at her high school, using her own experience to help others find their voice. During college application season, she struggled with her personal essay until Barrett found her asleep at her desk one night, a rough draft glowing on her laptop screen. Family isn't just about blood or race or what people expect, she had written. It's about the choice to love each other through the hard days, the good days, and all the days in between. My father taught me that when he chose 6 scared girls and gave them a chance to become who they were meant to be. Through all the teenage drama, first dates, driving lessons, and identity struggles, their family bond grew stronger. Barrett learned to navigate conversations about racism with honesty and humility, always ensuring his girls had strong black role models in their lives while being the consistent, loving father they needed. They created new traditions that honored both their shared present and their individual heritage. Sunday dinners became a blend of soul food recipes taught by Miss Patricia and Barrett's attempted recreations of his own mother's dishes, some more successful than others. One evening, as they all sat on their front porch watching the sunset, a tradition that had survived all the changes of teenage years, Joy read one of her poems aloud. It was about a patchwork family, stitched together with love and choice rather than matching threads. We're not a typical family, she concluded, looking around at her sisters and their father. We're better. We're proof that love doesn't care about color or biology or what anyone else thinks. It just grows, filling all the spaces that used to be empty. Barrett looked at his daughters, amazed at how they'd grown from scared, untrusting children into strong, confident young women. Every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt had been worth it for this, the simple joy of being a family, completely and unapologetically themselves. 10 years had passed since that first night when Officer Barrett found 6 scared girls in an empty apartment. The morning sun streamed through the windows of their family home, now decorated with college diplomas, sports trophies, and artwork that told the story of their journey. Rose stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her law school graduation cap. At 23, she'd become everything she'd once dreamed of and more. Barrett watched from the doorway, remembering the protective 13-year-old who'd once stood between him and her sisters, unsure if they could trust anyone again. "You know," Rose said, catching his eye in the mirror, "I'm using my first case to help other families like ours. There are so many kids out there who need someone to fight for them." The house was buzzing with activity. Joy, fresh from her poetry fellowship in New York, was helping Faith set up her art pieces for her first major gallery showing. Their collection, titled Colors of Change, featured portraits of mixed families from across the country. "Remember when people used to stare at us in the grocery store?" Faith laughed, carefully wrapping a canvas. "Now they're lining up to have their families featured in my art." Grace's voice drifted in from the backyard, where she was rehearsing with her community youth choir. She turned their garage into a music studio, teaching kids from all backgrounds to find their voice. The same church that had once received complaint letters about her solo now had a waiting list for her classes. Hope burst through the door, her debate team coach lanyard still around her neck. At 20, she'd become the youngest debate coach in their district's history, teaching kids how to stand up for what they believe in with both passion and grace. "Dad, you won't believe what happened today," she called out, dropping her bags. "Remember that boy who wouldn't date me because of his parents? His little sister joined my team." She said our family inspired her to think differently about what love looks like. Little Angel, now a high school senior and student body president, sat at the kitchen table working on her college applications. Her essay topic, "How One Night Call Changed a Town's Understanding of Family." "Do you think we really did that?" she asked, looking up at Barrett. "Change how people think about family." Barrett was about to answer when the doorbell rang. Outside stood Mrs. Thompson, their former neighbor who'd once pulled her children away from playing with the girls. She wasn't alone. With her was a young couple, looking nervous but hopeful. "They're thinking of adopting," Mrs. Thompson explained. "Cross-racial adoption. I told them there's no better family to talk to than yours." The living room filled up as each sister joined the conversation, sharing their experiences openly and honestly. The couple listened, tears in their eyes, as 6 strong young women described how love had transformed their lives. "It wasn't always easy," Rose explained. "But the hard parts made us stronger. Dad taught us that family is built day by day, choice by choice." Later that evening, they gathered for their traditional Sunday dinner. The table had grown over the years. Officer Chen and his family were regular guests. Miss Patricia claimed her spot as honorary grandmother, and even their biological mother joined them occasionally, clean and sober for 8 years now. "I need to make an announcement," Little Angel said, standing up with that same quiet confidence she'd developed over the years. "I got early acceptance to the police academy. I want to be the kind of officer Dad is, someone who sees beyond the surface and isn't afraid to stand up for what's right." Barrett looked around the table at his family. Joy, the poet whose words about their journey had been published nationally. Faith, whose art hung in galleries, challenging perspectives about family and identity. Grace, whose music program had become a model for inclusive community building. Hope, shaping young minds to think critically and compassionately. Rose, about to become a family law attorney, ready to help other families find their way together. The town had changed too. What had once been whispered about in disapproval was now celebrated as an example of love's power to transform. Other families like theirs had moved to Pine Grove, drawn by its reputation as a place where diversity was embraced and different family structures were welcomed. That night, as the house quieted down, Barrett found a package on his desk. Inside was a book, a collection of letters from families across the country who'd been inspired by their story to open their hearts and homes to children regardless of race or background. "Dad?" Rose stood in the doorway, the rest of her sisters behind her. "We have something to show you." They led him to the backyard, where a small gathering had assembled without his knowledge. Friends, neighbors, fellow officers, and families they'd helped over the years stood together. A banner stretched across the garden. 10 years of choosing love. You didn't just change our lives, Rose spoke for all of them. You started a ripple that's still spreading. Every family that finds each other despite their differences, every child who learns that love doesn't have to match to be real, that's part of our legacy. Little Angel stepped forward with a plaque from the town council, naming Barrett as Pine Grove's Citizen of the Decade. But it was what she said next that captured the true meaning of their journey. Some people spend their whole lives wondering if they made a difference. Our dad never has to wonder. He changed 6 lives in one night, and those 6 lives changed hundreds more. That's what love does, it multiplies. As the stars came out over their backyard full of people from all walks of life, celebrating the power of choosing love over fear, Barrett realized that their story had never really been about adoption or race, or what makes a normal family. It had been about the courage to see beyond society's boundaries and recognize that family is wherever love is brave enough to grow. The 6 scared girls he'd found in that empty apartment had become strong women who were changing their world, one brave choice at a time. And somewhere out there, other families were finding their way together, inspired by the simple truth that love doesn't need permission to create something beautiful.